moment I picked up that drumstick, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly how I wanted to hit a drum, how I needed it to sound, absolutely everything. You've gone from 70, 80,000 people to then being put on a Ryanair flight and being back home in the West Midlands thinking, how do I tell everybody, right? I just had one of the moments of my life, you know, having opened for the Killers, then watched their set from stage, and then being sent home, and you've got to ring your mum and dad and say, Mum and Dad, it's over, I'm done. I walked through a department store and we hear my band song playing. And my wife turns to me and, of course, says, how much you're being paid. This is almost the moment of my entire life has just collided, because it's my greatest passion of music and it's one I've known, and it's tech. And I kind of went, no, like somebody must have built this, right? Somebody must have built a way to just monitor music. I'm going to get beat up for this now. You know, the second most famous Paul investor in ABBA, this is Paul McCartney. Even as I say it to you now, like, yeah, I get the butterflies because it's Paul McCartney, right? This is the greatest living musician of all time. My first superstar investor was Bjorn from ABBA. I still don't know how Bjorn found it. And I got this email from Bjorn saying, love the business, can I help?
Welcome to Tileyard, The Secret Sauce, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes at Europe's largest creative community. I'm your host, Nick Keynes, and each episode we'll be chatting with the game changers, disruptors, and innovators who are shaping the future of the music industry right here at Tileyard. Get ready for some incredible stories and inspirational characters. Let's go. Ryan, we've just done an interview before the camera started rolling. We've known each other a long time, 2018. Thanks for coming on the show. Your story, I mean, there are so many to tell. It's one of the things, this podcast is all about storytelling. Yeah. And right, the Tileyard story is very much, it's your story, it's the Audoo story, it's the Ryan story. So going back, we'll come to Audoo in a minute, but going back right to the beginning, how it all got started. Music, when did music first come into your world, into your life?
So I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. So my dad is obsessed with soul and Motown music. Big record collector, and he desperately wanted me to play the saxophone. He just got this big thing that I'm going to play the saxophone, and I think I was 8 or 9, and they bought me a clarinet because everybody said, learn to the clarinet, and then that will lead
natural
on because it's, and kind of go through that way. And that was it. That was kind of the first foray into it, and loved it from that moment. And I guess kind of then you're going into your teens, and 14, 15-year-old lads from the West Midlands, are quite angry, and Limp Bizkit was big and things like that, and Blink-182, and that was the music that we were listening to. And all of a sudden, the clarinet and the saxophone didn't seem that cool, so picked up drumsticks and never looked back, and that was it. And actually, I always say going through kind of the woodwind journey, you get classically trained, and then you can translate that into really any genre. With the drums, from the moment I picked up that drumstick, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew exactly how I wanted to hit a drum, how I needed it to sound, absolutely everything. So spent my teens in bands. So played in tribute bands, played in soul and Motown bands, wedding bands, and then kind of rock and roll indie bands that set up with friends that I'd grown up with or from my local area, and from there. So 19 years old, I'd finished my A-levels, and I was just getting ready to go to music college. So I'd got in at Leeds College of Music.
So so music was music very much a career that you were thinking was a possibility?
So my plan was to be a music teacher. So actually, music and English teacher. That was all I ever wanted to be. So which I always look back, and it's quite funny because I was told while I was doing my GCSEs at school that I wasn't clever enough to be a teacher, so which is probably still right. And that was it. So I'd done my A-levels. I was going to music college, and the plan was to go and do my 3 years of music college, come out of it, either be a peripatetic or kind of high school music English teacher, and that was the passion, right? That was kind of where I was going with it all. So
interesting. And then fate intervened.
Fate happened.
So I know what comes next, because that story's always resonated when I met you, because of similar kind of journeys we were on. But I always vow I don't talk about Ultra in this podcast, apart from every single episode. So about to go to college. What happened?
And playing in an indie band with some friends, and we played a gig down here in London at the Dublin Castle, and what we didn't realise that night was Baby Shambles were also playing.
Right.
And the next morning, and actually it's so funny because it was right at the height of the Pete Doherty, Kate Moss era as well. And we knew something was going on because when we turned up at Dublin Castle, there was press everywhere. And we're like, hey, we've made it. Definitely wasn't for us. We played our bit to probably a half-empty room, and of course they came in and the whole room filled up. And actually when they came on, we'd stood there watching them, kind of enjoying it, and our guitarist goes, he's got the exact same Les Paul as mine. And then he realises about 3 minutes later that Baby Shambles' guitarist has walked into the dressing room, taken our guitar out and just playing with it, right? So I don't think he's washed that guitar since. But then literally the next morning, we were in papers, we were ones to watch, you know, booking agents, managers, labels, everybody was on top of us. So we signed a deal. We put out a single about 6 months later. We went on tour pretty much non-stop for about 18 months, so mainly Europe. The single that we put out charted at number 10. And then that was it. 18 months later, gone.
I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, we will talk in future episodes about, you know, the music industry and how, as an artist, how it's changed. You know, I was lucky enough, similar sort of story. We signed to a major label, and before you know it, you're putting records out and having hits. So it's a different world now. But
so crazy.
At that time, what was going through your head? Was it enjoy it? Was it like we're going to make it? I'm going to be a multimillionaire. Where was your head?
I think it was a bit of everything, because for me, music was the path, right? And it was the dream. I think my other three bandmates, I think our singer, music was kind of his path, but probably not as structured as mine was. Our bass player and guitarist weren't. They were great musicians. They were really talented, really good at what they did. But I don't think they'd ever kind of woke up and said, that's it, I'm going to absolutely go for my career in music. And I think there was this real hybrid of riding and enjoying it and getting to see your heroes and getting to experience the world, etc. But it could be over overnight, and which it was. And how do you kind of plan for the future just in case, and can you survive, and can you get kind of through to the next day as well? I always think, you know, and I think my bandmates would agree, I was probably the most studious, because I was always obsessed with just music. So even kind of getting ready for a gig, they would always be front of house in the bar. They like to drink, and I would be back, you know, with kind of a rudiments, you know, kind of practice pad, going through and working out different ways I could do a fill and things like that, because I'd always got this obsession of, okay, you know, this is a part of my life, but I want it to be a really long-term thing. So, you know, like, even if this band doesn't work out, how do I make sure that I could even go and be a session musician, or I could, you know, teach it properly and just really understand, you know, from the joy of music that I have. So
yeah, the preparation, it's important, the detail. It's really important.
Completely.
I mean, we often, my bandmates, I'm still in business with one of them to this day. So, you know, best mates and all that. But, you know, you can sort of, you rise and fall in equally fast.
Yeah.
And so you had this amazing sort of, from a gig that you were not really expecting a great deal out of.
People.
You've had a hit.
Yeah.
So touring the world, how quickly did it then sort of fizzle?
Oh, fast. So we'd been kind of gigging locally in the Midlands, and, you know, we'd done a few London ones, a few northern ones, Manchester, Sheffield, but all of a sudden then we were going into Europe, and we were getting on tour support. So, you know, we opened for the Killers, we opened for REM, we went on tour with Little Man Tate, with the Charlatans. Amazing. You know, some bands that
great time.
Yeah, bands that I'd grown up watching and were pretty obsessed with, you know, and you know, I still have it now. You know, you go into these rooms and they'd introduce themselves, hey guys, you know, so and so from this band, and you're like, yeah, I know, I got your poster on my wall at my parents' home. Like, you know, you don't need to introduce yourself, and I think that was what it was. And of course, it's such a different experience going from playing your own shows. So we kind of went from playing shows in the Midlands where we could get a couple of hundred people. You know, when the first single went out, we played the Wolverhampton Wolfram Hall, which was about 1,500 people, and we sold that out. And, you know, that was, you know, it is always going to go down as one of the nights of my life, you know, because the parents were there and they watched their their son and friends sell out, you know, a venue that I'd seen every one of my heroes in. So that was magical. But then to step up and go into some of the bigger shows that, you know, the Charlatans tour, it was averaging 8,000 a night. You know, we went out and played Frequency Festival in Austria, which was the killer show. It was 80,000 people, right? Like it's a whole different beast. And, you know, you've got crew supporting you and all that. And you know, even now, and I see it in Audoo life, you know, I'm a control freak in everything I do. And the bit that I used to hate, because again, being that kind of perfectionist in the way that I approached how I played, I was exactly the same with my gear. So, you know, every show I wanted to tune my drum heads. I wanted to make sure everything was in exactly the right place. So if I'm hitting a fill or something complex, I can get to it exactly how I want it to be. So yeah, it went from this kind of level of complete meticulousness that I had to work through to allowing a drum tech to work with me and him get it, and kind of the rest of the things with the rest of the band as well.
It's really interesting. That's why I love these conversations. There's so many things you're saying that remind me. I can remember playing Wembley, for example.
Okay, yeah, cool. Okay.
You know, and we were miming, which we were really against until we realised we didn't actually have to play any of the notes, and we could have a couple. So we were at the bar just before the gig,
exactly.
And it was fantastic. You know, but I felt like a bit of a fraud as well. So it's a sort of double-edged sword. But you know, just to be on that stage, I look back now, 25 years later, and it's like, was that really me? And you look at the pictures and you realize. It's like, I don't think any of those was me. I don't look like any of them. But I often say that's a good analogy for certain things. You then, having the empathy, we've been there, we've touched it, we understand it, but then also it sort of sets you up. I think helps you build a bit of resilience in life as well. Have you found that? Have you drawn on a lot of that later in your life? Yeah,
because we were dropped. So my final gig with the band, and a couple of the guys kind of reformed and went at it again and didn't really reach the heights that I
didn't
guess
get the message.
Had. No, right. And it's you know, it's different things for different people, right? And so my final gig was Frequency Festival, Austria, Salzburg racetrack, 70,000 or 80,000 people, right?
Not a bad place to hang up the sticks.
Not bad, but you know, we pretty much were dropped as we came off stage. So it was like, you know, you've gone from 80,000 people to then being put on a Ryanair flight and being back home in the West Midlands thinking, you know, I almost swore then, but kind of going, how do I tell everybody, right? Like, you know, I just had one of the moments of my life, you know, having like opened for the Killers, then watched their set from stage, and then being sent home, and you've got to ring your mum and dad and say, Mum and Dad, it's over, I'm done. You got to, you know, my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, kind of go, I don't know what to do now. You know, I'm now 21 years old. I didn't go to uni. I've got, my whole life plan has just been completely shattered, and I need to mope around, but I also have got bills to pay at the end of this month, and I've got to figure out how to get through. And I think from that and I think that's what music kind of gives us. When you see it all the time, you can be at the absolute height of what, you know, you are, and everybody's at different levels, but it can become crashing down overnight. And it is the most humbling thing you will ever go through, because you suddenly realize none of it matters. You know, you go from turning up in a city to people knowing your name and being queued for, you know, people queuing for your autograph who'd bought that first single. And you know, even that, you know, when you're signing it, you're playing it cool because you've got to play it cool, but you're loving every second of it. So then, you know, I was 48 hours later in my local high street, walking up and down there with a CV asking, you know, shopkeepers for a job. Yeah. Literally, that's where I was at. So, you know, and it shows how quickly, and even, you know, a year after, you know, you'd be, because I went then into retail, get into that. You know, I stood in the shop and I'm kind of almost saying to, you know, colleagues in the store, you know, I used to be a rock star, and they're kind of like, he's crazy, whatever, you know.
It's because there's nothing worse, that sort of slightly sad perception of the failed musician,
completely.
Right? And we often laugh about this industry's full of us, you know. You know, I mean, it's interesting. You know, I was mates with a very good friend of mine was in a band called Jocasta, and they were the first mates in a band that got signed to Ireland. And they made the record, and they were going to be massive, and they did their album release gig, and then got dropped backstage after that, you know. And I can remember thinking, wow, that was before I got into the business, you know.
Exactly.
I was sort of prepared for it, I suppose. But it's amazing how these things can, you know. I often say to people, you know, if you make it, it messes you up. But if you don't make it, it can. Well, if you don't make it, it messes you up. If you make it, it can mess you up even more.
Exactly.
You know?
So,
but it's also a wonderful industry, you know. So there's.
Yeah, and I think, you know, rejection, and you know, it's funny because, you know, we live in this kind of social media age, and you know, you consume all these clips of, you know, Elon Musk clips, and, you know, all these kind of top entrepreneurs around the world saying things, and you do realize that, you know, and it's corny to say because everybody says it, but out of those darkest times is where, you know, you can either go into a corner and just hide, or you can come back out swinging. And, you know, and I think it's really built resilience, and I actually look at that throughout my childhood. So, you know, I've got an older brother who, he's 4 years older, and he was just better at me than everything, right? So he played tennis. I could never beat him. You know, he was cleverer than me. You know, his grades at school were better than me. So there was always that little bit of, you know, looking up to him and competitiveness kind of upwards. But actually, kind of, and I always think, you know, because, you know, my exam, you know, when I look at my GCSEs, it was like 10 C's and an A star. Yeah. The A star was music, right? And because I was always that C student, you know, I was never top of the class. So I'd always got to fight to be noticed a bit. I'd always got to, you know, really push myself into these bits harder. And I see it now, I guess, you know, as a business founder and somebody who employs people. And we've seen it a few times where we've had people who are straight A students, and you've got to set them tasks, and all they can do is complete the task in front of them. They have little ability to think outside of it. And, you know, it's kind of like, yes, set me a task, I'll deliver it, and that's done, which is great in some scenarios. But sometimes you need someone to go, actually, I'm just going to break this. I'm going to change it. I'm going to move it all around and kind of, you know, see how we can fit this together and potentially come up with a better outcome or a better alternative scenario in kind of what we're looking at. So I think, you know, somebody said to me not long back, they were like, how long did it take you in your life to get to this moment? And I was like, quite literally from the day I'm born, right? You're a product of every single moment that has happened to you, and yeah, you still go back and bring it up and think of it now.
Thanks to our main sponsor, TYX Studios. Based here in the heart of Tileyard, if you're looking for an amazing place to record your podcast, Jack and the team have everything that you need. They built some top-notch podcast, music, photography, and content studios that are perfect for bringing your ideas to life. Plus, they offer memberships so you can get the most out of their beautiful co-working spaces too. Check them out at tyxstudios.com to see what they're all about. Big shout out to Jack and everyone at the TYX Studios for supporting us on our journey.
That's why I've always enjoyed our chats, you know, and it's, there's so many touch points. I mean, yeah, nature and nurture,
yeah,
you know, luck or judgment, you
completely.
know. I mean, nature. I heard someone say, you know, nature, the cards you're dealt with, it's what you're born with. But then nurture, does nurture finish when you're 18? No, your nurture never finishes. You're always learning and having experiences and building that resilience. It's good to fail, you know, because you learn more by failure than success. So
and every day, you know, I'm applying, you know, every single part of your life where you've learned something, you go, actually, you do something, and I guess I do it more because I'm getting older and I've got, you know, my daughter now, so I'm, you know, kind of going through that with her as well, in that you realise that you had that learnable moments. It's been nurtured into you, and you just do it, and yeah, there's some kind of almost more consistent self-reflection as you go through that journey as well. So yeah,
and trying to draw the positives. I suppose that takes us to the next. So you've been on the roller coaster ride, you've had the highs and the lows, and you're walking down the high street with your CV looking for a job. So. How did you go from there to where to the beginning of Audoo, which is the journey you're on at the moment?
So I always say, and it's worth saying, I ended up in a car phone warehouse store. So the manager there, I still swear to this day, and he's still a good friend. I think he just took pity on me. So it was the Friday that I went in, and he said to me, he said, look, Saturday's our busiest day. If you come in tomorrow and you're able to sell, I think it's 2 or 3 phones, he said, I'll give you a job. And that was the deal. And I went in and I sold 5. And that was it. And then I spent nearly 8 years with Carphone. So from sales assistant manager, store manager, cluster of stores, and then went to Best Buy, which was the US electrical store. Then they basically merged with Carphone over here and opened some big box stores. And actually it goes back to that kind of that thing. So, you know, this 7-8 years there, and then Best Buy exited Europe. They decided to retreat to the US because recession was going on and it was going to take a lot more investment, and they wanted to go and reinvest into their US estate. And I was made redundant. And it's kind of, you know, it almost goes back to that moment with the band. And it's like, hang on, this is the only business that I've ever really, you know, outside of young jobs at 16 and things like that. This is the business where I've really just gone and cut my teeth, right, and really learn and become an adult. You know, I got married while I was at that business. Like all of those kind of things had happened, and I guess I'd gone from a guy who bummed out of a band to, kind of, very good
Building a
salary,
really
nice
successful
life.
career,
Bought first home and all that kind of stuff. And then by complete, again, luck, however we want to describe it, I was at a friend's wedding and I met this guy who had just started an app development business. So this would have been like 2011, just as apps were taking off. And we were sat next to each other and I completely bullshitted it, right? Yeah. So he's going, I've got loads of business coming in and I'm building these apps. And I was like, I know how to run a business. Blah, blah. I had no bloody idea really, right? Like, I knew how to drive a resort in a retail store, but not how to run a business. And it just took the opportunity, moved to London, went and worked with him. We grew that business. And I say he, because I was an employee and, I think I joined, there was probably about 30 staff in there. They sold it 2 years later with 120 staff, 75, 80 million pounds. Yeah. So did really well in it. And actually that was the moment where I went, okay, you fell into retail and retail is great, right? It's one of my bugbears in life is I think people look down on retail. Good quality retailing is an art.
I completely agree.
Like
understanding customer behaviors, sales, and it's, dealing with people.
And it's still in my blood, right? Like if I, there's a story I've told many times. I was in John Lewis on Oxford Street a couple of years ago. My wife saw some bed sheets and they weren't next to the display, so they got this beautiful display. So of course I said, hey, could we get some of those? Have you got any in the back? And she kind of came out and gave us one set. And I was like, are there any more in the back? She's like, yeah. I was like, go and bring them out. And I'm stood there in Oxford Street merchandising with her because I was like, no. And like, as we're doing it, 3 other people are like, hey, are they those? Yeah. I'm like, yeah. And I'm literally giving them out to people.
Brilliant.
Just couldn't resist.
You're a natural. You just can't help but sell.
Because it was frustrating me because I could see everyone. They were very nice bed sheets. And then, and I think, we went into Grapple, which was the app development business. And all of a sudden, there were a few things. I'd moved to London for the first time. A lot of the kids around me were privately educated and it was like, wow, this is a step up, right? I'd gone from probably the young gun in Carphone and Best Buy, kind of being mid to late 20s, a store manager. That was really successful at the time, to suddenly coming back in and seeing these guys who, and I don't think it was because their education was better, but I always say, and I think most people would say it, they had a confidence built into them. They believed they should be there, and I've always had that impostor syndrome. And it was like, okay, you've got to step up again now. You've got to learn quick and you've got to move really, really fast on that. And that was it. And before you know it, we're pitching to the CEOs of the biggest banks in the world. We built the Lloyds TSB mobile banking app, which was the first one in the UK. We did the Santander one. We did the app for FIFA. So for the 2014 World Cup, which had 2 billion people in it at one point, right? So I went from kind of, as I say, selling iPhones and selling washing machines on a shop floor and driving a team to do that, to being sat in front of actually Sepp Blatter at FIFA and, CEO of Lloyds TSB Bank, now Lloyds Bank, etc. So you suddenly realise that the way you behave, the way you act, everything about you just has to step up. It has to be more polished. You have to be more articulate. And I always say it was the appreciation of really learning your numbers and knowing what sat behind that and understood kind of at a corporate level how you drove, kind of products and something that was going to go out to. Because, I was used to, if you needed to show somebody how to use a washing machine, you would stand there and you would turn the dial and you would take it. So how do you communicate? So with the FIFA app, how do you, we built it in 9 languages. So how did I teach every country in the world in a different language to open application and use it without any tutorial or without sitting by them? So the way that we had to go back and reverse the business case to really understand that, and even down to kind of the user interface, because we had to do an Arabic version. Well, you and I, because you're English, are used to reading from right to left to right. A, I don't speak Arabic, and B, everything for us, we go left to right because that's how we read. Yeah. Of course, Arabic goes right to left. So all of the gestures that they wanted to do, it's not swipe left, it's swipe the other way, because that is how they do it. So it brought up a whole new level of fascinating challenges, and it just gave me an opportunity to learn
and grounding
and kind of be in it.
It's interesting.
Amazing.
I mean, obviously, I know what comes next, and it's interesting hearing you talking about your journey and all of everything. It makes so much sense. It's like there's no way you could have probably done any of this stuff without any of those chapters. I mean, what's quite clear to me, imposter syndrome, that comes up. Doesn't it affect us all? You know, some would say it's humility. You know, if you don't have a bit of that, you're not a real person. You know, you don't have that humility, which is an important personal kind of attribute and human attribute. I mean, in terms of, it's quite clear that you've got energy. You know, you've got a lot of energy. You've got a lot of passion. You know, I mean, is a lot of it? Have you always been ambitious? Do you remember being ambitious back in the music days and still to this day?
I think so, and I think my parents would definitely say that about me. So it's funny when you say about humility, like, but yeah, my dad would still slap me if I got too big for my boots. He'd be the first one to tell me. He'd be straight on the phone and letting me know. But I think. And again, it's always that product of where you grew up, right? The Midlands, you know, that was growing up. I had a great childhood. I was really, really happy, but I always knew there was a world outside of it, and I always wanted to get out. And I guess, you know, so I was born 85, so kind of, you know, grew up really in the 90s, and because I had an older brother, I guess I got into pop culture quicker because you follow what your older brother does. So, you know, that was the generation of MTV Cribs and kind of all that stuff. So, you know, and that was almost the pedestal of what you wanted to be, right? You wanted to be a multi-millionaire.
So you're goal driven, would you say? So you've always got the sort of
goal driven. Yeah, because I think you look at it and you go, actually, that just looks great. Like, why wouldn't you want that in your life? Why wouldn't you want to go and achieve that? Why wouldn't you want to go and see more of the world than just kind of the confines that you have? So yeah, I definitely think I've always been ambitious, and then it goes back to imposter syndrome, because there's the ambition versus what I think I can actually deliver and get against and kind of go.
I think it's good to have a reality check on that. Talking of ambition, yeah, Paul Kemp, who is my business partner, owns Tileyard. He's still to this day one of the most ambitious people that I've that I know, that I've ever met. You know, he's an incredible. I mean, you know Paul very well as well, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But yeah, just the sheer drive and ambition he has. He has an interesting story to tell, which I'm sure he'll tell it on this podcast at some point. But it's just amazing, and I think having goals and having a vision of where you want to get to is a common theme amongst those that are doing really interesting, great things.
And it's because, like, you know, Paul to me is one of the inspirations. You know, every time I see Paul, I'm just like, that's life goals right there, and you see it with everybody, you know, Paul's level of success and beyond. I've been lucky with Audoo because we travel a lot, we spend a lot of time, particularly in the US. And the thing that I always think about a lot is, you know, the US is so polar opposite. You know, their level of wealth to poverty is so far apart, much further than I think it is here. But they all believe in the American dream, right? Now, whether the American dream is real, we could probably do another 10 podcasts on, right? And what we think that is. But I was having this debate the other day. I don't know what the British dream is, right? Or the English dream, or however your European dream at this stage kind of is. And you see it a lot, and you see it in the drive. So, and what I've seen in kind of US people that I've met who are very successful, people here, is the ones that are really successful and ambitious and driven don't ever stop. They don't ever say enough is enough, because they're either creating new jobs, they're creating new businesses and new partners, etc. And I think that's the bit that has always excited me the most about this. It's kind of been, you know, when I started out, I had a very clear vision, you know, for Audoo, which we'll get onto. But it was always kind of a, you know, this is the path I think it's going to go, but you know, things will come up. I have no idea what they will be. Hopefully they're cool. You know, hopefully there's not too many disasters. And I think that's been the bit that's always really excited me about this. And I think that's what brings the energy, because genuinely no day is the same. You know, I don't get up with that, oh God, it's a Monday morning feeling. You don't. So even though, as I'm sat here today, very jet lagged, because I stepped off a plane 48 hours ago in a very different time zone, but actually none of it matters. And the bit that I think I've got particularly the best in this is, you know, I've handpicked a team here. You know, I've built this business, and we've kind of done it with our leadership team, where, you know, they'll need to go and hire a developer or an ops person who know their area way better than I do, right? Because I'm looking over everything, and of course I haven't done those roles in my career. And right at the end, and I learned this from Carphone, I kind of do what I call the culture fit interview. So is this somebody that we want in that business that's going to come in and slot in and be great for us. And we haven't always got it right. We've had a few, but there was one, I always remember this one interview, and this guy had passed with flying colours on the technical ability. And I said to him, so, you know, and I do it in if they're sat in front of me, they've already been through 2 or 3 stages, and this is the, you know, the Ryan seal of approval, whatever we want to call it. And I kind of do it deliberately. I say, I'd love to meet you, like, you know, have you got any kids? Have you got any brothers and sisters? Tell me about life. What's your favourite band? What are you doing? This guy said to me, so I don't really like music. I was like,
oh dear. That's
really?
Not the right answer.
I was kind of going, well, I don't really know what we're ever going to talk about, ever. So he also didn't like football as well. I was like, oh my God, like what do we say? And I was kind of going, that's a really strange thing to do, right? Because you're sat in front of somebody who, you know, at this point we were 2 or 3 years in the journey. So done lots of interviews, lots of press about we're fighting for artists to get paid. So essentially has dedicated the last few years of their life to music and musicians and the fight for them, and to go, I don't really like music, was like,
that's not
scrub that
work.
one off.
I think, I mean, I often sort of I talk to my kids about, you know, life and being passionate and daring to dream a bit. I think that's the key. I mean, I certainly get that from you. I can remember vividly when I was 12 at school, teacher went around the class and asked everyone what they wanted to do when they grew up, and I said I want to be a pop star, and they said no, come on, stop mucking about. What do you really want to be? I said, oh, go on, then a racing driver. And funny enough, luckily I wasn't very good at either of them, but I managed to do both. And I think it's because I just had a belief that you can kind of, if you really want it, and this is another Paul Kemp thing, if you really want something enough, it's possible.
And I do think this is the thing. It's my worry generally for the education system, you know, and I get, you know, daughter's just gone into year 1, so, you know, we're kind of going back through it, learning phonics and all that. It's very, very difficult. I feel like I'm relearning how to read and write.
I never knew it in the first place.
Well, exactly. So I'm not actually learning it for the first time. But my worry is I don't want them to kill creativity, because she's got a great imagination, right? It's amazing watching her. She's 5. She's so creative, and it's so fun seeing her do and these things. And that's the bit that I think we have to be particularly careful of, is that, you know, kind of as, I guess, business people, and what we're doing is creativity is a great thing, you know.
Well, very much at the core of what we do at Tileyard, and what this podcast is about. You know, obviously music is at the core. Yeah. But it's creativity. Good segue into sort of Audoo. So the next piece of the jigsaw.
So the next piece,
pulled everything that you had achieved up to that point together.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of time in between. So from the app development startup, I went to Visa and headed up data for them, and then went into a fintech business.
I think you worked with a mate of mine there.
Yeah, I did. I went with Tony. Yeah, he was really, really good fun. We got to. Yeah, he's a great guy. So
he sends his best, actually.
So we need to do beers. Yeah. But we, so I'm in a fintech business, and I walk through a department store. I keep having all these inspirations on Oxford Street, right? And we hear my band song playing. And my wife turns to me and, of course, says, how much you're being paid. The caveat, she's an accountant, so, of course, you know, always counting the pennies. And I still see it so vividly. And I guess it's because it was a life-changing moment. You know, I said to her, look, forget the really expensive Louis Vuitton Chanel bag, whatever you're looking at, like, it's a fraction of a penny. Don't even worry about it. And then, of course, a few weeks later, I get my statement, and I couldn't really understand it and didn't really think much more of it. And then, you know, one evening I sat there and I'm like, I should Google this. I wonder how it works. I wonder how they know. And what I found was pages and forums about distribution of royalties and how little data there was there. And I'm kind of sat there going, well, hang on. I've just spent the last 20 years of my professional career outside of the band, in retail, but then going into the app development business, where we work with banks, and it was all about data points, going into Visa, where it was all about data and transaction values, and then going into a fintech business, which was to do with loyalty and payments, which is all data. And I went, this is almost the moment of my entire life has just collided, because it's my greatest passion of music, and it's one I've known, and it's tech. And I kind of went, no, like, somebody must have built this, right? Somebody must have built a way to just monitor music, and there's Shazam, right? And there's things like that. And more research and more. And I'm just like, okay, so this is weird. It does seem to be a genuine problem. So,
born in King's Cross and brewed right here in Tileyard, Two Tribes is one of the fastest growing and most exciting independent beer brands, founded with the creative community front of mind whilst brewing great beer. You'll not only find them in supermarkets and some of your favourite local pubs and restaurants, but in art galleries, festivals and music venues too. Award-winning beer Two Tribes focuses on more than what's in the can or the glass. It's an opportunity to create memorable moments in memorable places with memorable people. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Check them out by visiting www.twotribes.co.uk and see what they're up to on Instagram at Two Tribes Brew. Please always drink responsibly.
I just on evening and weekends for a few weeks built a really basic prototype. So I kind of I used Shazam as the inspiration and smart speakers, and I went, okay, because I've kind of worked in financial services, GDPR was this big thing that was coming, and it was all about privacy. I'm like, how can I do it that you never record or transmit or store audio? So it's completely privacy first. It gets recognized in an instant. None of this holding your phone as close to a speaker. Just how can you do it? So kind of built it, went and showed a few friends, and they were like, nah, mate, you can't be right about this, right? So yeah, tech looks cool, but like that can't be a problem, right? So anyway, I was like, I think it is. And even at this point, I'd actually just been offered a job with Peloton to go and kind of head up their European operations, and it was all lined up, and I was kind of ready to go, and I was like, and I was like, you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to be really cheeky, and I went on LinkedIn. And I messaged the chairman of PRS for music here in the UK, a guy called Nigel Elton. And it was a very much, you don't know me, but I wondered if I could buy you a coffee and just grab 20 minutes of your time. I've got something that I think could help. And actually my intention going into that meeting with Nigel was just to go, look, I've kind of built the tech. You guys are a massive organisation. Just have it. I hope it's something that's really good for you. I've got a wonderful new job lined up. You know, I'll have fun. Anyway, that 20 minutes became 2 hours at his office. And he said to me, I showed him what was going on, talked about the problem, realized it was a major problem. It was global. And right at the end of it, he said to me, look, he said, let me connect you to the PRS team so you can go and kind of show them what it is. He said, but beyond that, he said, this is global, right? And he said, you should really think about this. He said, because if you can get this right, everybody's going to need it. And that was,
a bit of a lightning bolt.
That was the moment, and I guess that's where it then comes full circle. So Nigel had been on the PRS board for like 25 years. He'd been the chairman, I think, for about 8 years at that point. And as of January last year, he's now my chairman. So he left PRS because I think he saw what we're doing. He's somebody who's been in music forever as a publisher, and I think he probably could see the energy that and the momentum that we were building, and that everybody was starting to really be receptive to what we're doing. And and I tell Nigel every time, that was a real life-changing moment for me that he saw that. So we've spent the last I'm nearly 6 years into this journey now, which is crazy. We were saying just before we started recording, when I first truly started out, I said to my wife, just give me 6 months, and then I'll go back and get a job if it doesn't work out. So it definitely got out of hand at some point.
What an amazing sliding doors moment, though. And I think a lot of these conversations that I have the privilege of having, there's so many of those. Everyone's got you come to a T junction. Do I go left or I go right?
Completely.
But you made that decision an easier decision than maybe it could have been, because you had to get up and go and talk to Nigel.
I do. I think that was the validation, right? And even to this moment as I'm sat here, there's still self-doubt. Can it really scale? Can we really get bigger? Can it really work?
I think you might have proven that it is scalable.
It is. But you kind of go through that, and as you say, and it's funny because I went through the toughest time we had in Audoo was we were due to launch a pilot in the UK with PRS in April of 2020, just as COVID hit, right? And of course, as that was happening, all the gyms closed and Peloton's stock price.
So this is a solution to music being played in public retail spaces.
Exactly. So anywhere that you hear music, we focused in two areas. So public performance. So retail, gyms, cafes, bars, and we were in schools because schools play music. We're in. I don't know why tag away to schools to strip clubs. We're in strip clubs because you hear music there. Yeah, anywhere in the real world where you hear music, we have built this small device called an audio meter, and it tracks the music that's played, and then that all of that data will then report it back to the rights organisation in whichever territory you're in, and it gives them the data to better distribute their royalties, because the way that they were doing it before was they had people out there with manual clipboards, so sat there physically writing it down for a few hours. So lots of human error, and also very costly to do that from a resource perspective. Or they would look at things like radio and streaming data and go, okay, well, we know that, let's say Ultra is in the top 10. So actually they're going to give them a large slice of the pie. What we've seen, really in the last 3 years since we've been really live as a commercial business, is what happens in the real world versus streaming and radio is so far apart.
Completely
different. So we were just looking a couple of weeks ago in one of the territories. So the top 10 artists by playback actually account for less than 1% of the plays. If you move that to radio, it's like 70% of the plays. So the parallels are just vastly different.
Well, what's a word you use a lot, and we'll come back to it, is data. And I can remember when I met you, that was an interesting part of our conversation. With what I loved about it, being the simpleton that I am. I remember, we get given, and certainly we're given a lot of, back in the day, we're getting given a lot of decks. We've invested in lots of stuff here, as you know.
Yeah.
And what I loved about your deck was the story, the authenticity of the narrative, your real, true story. I could relate to it, because I could say the same.
You've seen it, yeah,
my
exactly.
PRS checks didn't have very many public performance kind of royalty numbers next to it, but also it was a simple solution to a problem that hadn't been solved, and that's what I really loved. And I think a lot of business ideas now, often they have the product or create a solution and then try and find the problem that it solves.
Yeah,
so
completely.
it was just very straightforward.
Yeah.
It's one of our better decisions. We invested, we came on board.
You did.
But I remember you saying this is going to be, I think, whilst it's a physical product, it's hardware, the data is where the real value is going to lie. And so
Completely.
you're seeing that now, 5, 6 years later.
So we're seeing it with the rights organisations, so the performing rights and the collective management organisations around the world where we're working. Where we're kind of moving into territory now is it's the next set of value of the data back to the creative world. So we've now got major artists, artists up and coming, publishing houses, booking agents coming to us saying, hey, we're about to put a tour on in Australia. What does your data say? So, and we can look at it and go, you know what? Like, if you look at your plays in, public venues in Melbourne versus Sydney, it's running 3-1. So you know what? If you're booking your tour, do 2 nights in Melbourne, but drop a night in Sydney, etc. So it's becoming really, really tangible for them to make decisions.
It's a multifaceted tool.
Yeah, and I think, even back to the Tileyard, so when we first met, I think I was still at the kitchen table, but you got hypnosis here, and it's funny because I always remember starting and people saying to me, who work for music, is there really any value in this music? Is that, really? And then, you've got Merck and Ben and the team at Hypnosis got and raised 3 billion and changed it into an asset class and a listed business. I know it's changed now and it's come back into it, and you've seen multiple song funds all up. And even throughout my journey, you had people going, is there really value into it? So, and not understanding it at the start. So then suddenly Shakira and the Red Hot Chili Peppers being on the front of the Financial Times, selling their catalogue for a 20x multiple, and people going, oh my God, this is an asset class. This is really, really valuable. So even the song funds like that are coming and saying, hey, we're thinking of buying a catalogue. What do you think, right? Do you think it's overperforming there, so we're going to see uplift because you're growing your business and pumping more data in, or actually do you think it's lower and we either need to look at a lower multiple or we just step away from that one or we can't do something? So I think it will change a lot. A traditional publisher used to acquire an asset and they would drive it on a release cycle, they would get it toured, and if they could get it sync into a TV advert, amazing. You've done a job. Yeah. Now it's more that actually I've got this asset that I've invested into. I've got to sweat it at every single point. So, is it driving on DSP? Is it in a good playlist, right? Can we get our position bumped up? Are we seeing it suddenly trending in gyms? Should we go to Apple Fitness or Peloton and say, you know what, this is a really good track, and we're happy to give some advertising revenue behind it to get it in there because they know they'll see a return on it. So it's the whole state of the industry has even in this short period of 6 years, in our view, has completely changed yet again.
Absolutely, seen so many sort of case studies of that. I mean, interesting talk about, we often talk about the ingredients to success, whether we've touched on a few, timing and team and the idea and the product, and funding is another one. And one a great story, Paul Kemp is an investor, but I think you've got a slightly less famous Paul who's another investor. And one of the things you've been very, very, very successful in is raising money, which is I think a lot of business owners say to me, half the job is building the business, the other half is raising the money.
It is
to keep growing it. So tell us a couple of names that we might have heard of that have bought into this concept.
As we're on the Pauls, so I'm going to get beat up for this now. So, the second most famous Paul investor in our business is Paul McCartney. So
I've heard of him.
Little band. They sold a few records in the 70s. So and actually it's I mean like. I even as I say it to you now, like I get the butterflies because it's Paul McCartney, right? This is the greatest living musician of all time. Like I look at it, and even down to my band as an indie band, we existed because of the Beatles, right? I think pretty much every artist exists for them, and I kind of, and I've said it to his team multiple times. I'm like, you do realize that this business exists because of him, because I was in a band, and everything goes back to him, right? And when I met his team and showed them what we were doing, one of the first things they said to us was, look, we could lose out on this, right? Because we're huge and we are who we are. And, we know we get a good share of this. However, our opinion is that it needs to be more fair. It needs to be more transparent, and it needs to be better for the next generation. And that was kind of the premise that they went with, and they said, so we like the business, we're going to back it, we like the tech, etc., all that kind of stuff. But they were like, we're really, really on board with the mission, and we've seen this time and time again. So I guess my first superstar investor was Bjorn from ABBA, and Bjorn was an incoming email. I'd done an interview like this, and I still don't know how Bjorn found it, and I got this email from Bjorn saying, love the business, can I help? I'm a singer-songwriter. And I was like, actually, the first thing I did when I got that email was I sent a message to my friends on the WhatsApp group saying, which one of you are winding me up, right? And there were probably a few swear words in there as well. And of course, it was during COVID, so jumped on a Zoom with him, and he just, I love it. Like, if I can invest, I invest.
He's a passionate guy, isn't he? I mean, he's been to Tileyard a couple of times, and it's. I think that's what's so. It's such a worthy kind of sentiment behind your model. It's. Who wouldn't support it? It's you're doing the right thing,
and I think that's what we've seen throughout. So we had Bjorn, then Sir Paul. So. The Sir Paul McCartney, not the Sir Paul Kemp. I'm sure that's
coming.
That's coming
soon.
It's about time. And then Sir Elton, and it was exactly the same when I spoke to him and David and their team. They in particular, you've only got to look at their Glastonbury set a couple of years ago. He didn't bring out any megastars with him. He brought out all young talent of music that he just adored. Even in his podcast, Rocket Man Hour, it's all about the young talent that's coming through. I think what he's done for Dua Lipa and people like that has just been amazing. And I think it's great because, again, these guys are the ones that could lose the most here, right? In the equality change, in what's going. Then also none of them have sold their catalogs, so it's not like they're kind of going, well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. But the fact that they loved and backed the mission was huge. And as you say,
what an endorsement and advocacy to what you're doing. I mean, I could talk forever. In terms of where you're at now, next steps. I mean, the business is obviously you're doing incredibly well. What does the next 12 to 24 months look like for you?
So we're live in 15 countries right now around the world, which is crazy because I've had to visit them all, and there's certainly ones that I've never been to before as well. Our focus for the year ahead is the US. So we started to deploy in the US this summer, so kind of as of June, July time, and we're seeing lots and lots of traction out there now.
You doing state by state, or you?
Yeah, so we've actually started in Denver, purely because we had a great connection there within our investor network who said, I can help you getting some of these out. So we actually kind of went in a little bit stealth, where we used him to put them into the venues. Typically in a territory, we partner with the rights organization, and then they build it into their licensing model. So it's we call it an audio meter deliberately to be like a smart meter. So it's like you have electricity and gas, you have music, you have an audio meter, and then they build it into their terms. the US is slightly different because there's 4 rights organizations who are all competing with each other. So we kind of went, one of them's not going to pay to help us roll this out and drive it and out there because they know the others are going to piggyback on. So we've kind of self-funded it, gone into Denver, started to see these results, and then we've gone back to them all and gone, hey guys, just so you know, we did this, and they've all gone, oh wow, we really, really need that. So kind of the next 12 months in particular will be about really starting to scale our business into the US, deploying more team in there, and kind of going major city by major state as we go and releasing that data. And what's nice is because we're kind of through that initial curve of, okay, we're working with the rights organizations, it's all the other stakeholders in music that need it, because we're kind of self-driving it there. Actually, it means we can accelerate some of those conversations as well. So I'm back out there in a couple of weeks. And actually, I think during that trip, I don't think I'm seeing a single rights organization. I think all of my time is with publishers, major rights holders, and kind of, major artists as well, who are going, okay, we really want to get in on this and see it that way. So I think it'll be interesting to see, because, as a business, we have to grow revenue. I think our revenues will grow more aggressively and faster there because of all our learnings elsewhere and how we're going to do it. So yeah,
it's fantastic. Well, your energy is still there after 6 years. It's thanks so much for coming on. I mean, can't wait to get you back. And let's see where you are in another 2 years.
Cool.
It's clearly going to be it's something that is working and is going to continue to grow.
Thank you. And no, it's kind of almost full circle, because we office number 2 from my kitchen table was Tileyard, and we're still at Tileyard North, and we still are really proud of the association. Before we came in, I spoke to Paul Kemp yesterday, and kind of, I call it a bit of a therapy session, because he's been there when you're having a harder day, or you've got decisions to make, just to have somebody like Paul who has done it so many times over, and just ring him and say, hey, I need you to take your investor hat off, and you're not on the board, so there's none of that politics going on. I just need to talk to you, and he's always
he's
been
great.
there.
I usually need therapy after talking to Paul.
There is that as well. So
but no, he's amazing, and I think your story is exactly what Tileyard is all about. That's why I wanted to do the podcast. It's cool. Rather than us sort of talking about Tileyard, it's just great hearing your story, and it's an ongoing one. So Ryan, thanks so much. Can't wait for the next one.
Anytime, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Tileyard, The Secret Sauce, with me, your host, Nick Keynes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go to tileyard.co.uk to find out more about our amazing community, and looking forward to sharing more stories and insights from the heart of Tileyard.